taking his message about student loan reform to college campuses and key battleground states, trying to woo younger voters. Were instrumental to his win in 2008. Joining me now is Republican Senator Lamar Alexander, who's also the Education Secretary under former President George H.W. Bush. So I want to start right there. Senator Alexander, good morning with you. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Chuck. How are you?
I'm okay. So let's start with this issue. We heard Mitt Romney say he supports what the president is pushing today over the next couple of days, which is to make sure the interest rate on student loans does not double in July, that somehow Congress acts before then to keep the interest rate at 3.4%. Where are you on this?
Well, I agree with Mitt Romney, and I agree with the president for now. I mean, what we're talking about is 40% of the student loans. Student loans are at 6.8% on interest, which is a lot better than a student could get if it go into a bank. And in July, 40% of them go up to 6.8%. That's about $7 a month in savings for a student. So the way to pay for that is to take the money that Congress took from students to help pay for the health care law, pay for that for this year, use a little bit of the extra money to help shore up Pell Grants, and then throw it all in the bucket at the end of the year when we're looking at how much money we've got to spend.
So you would take it out of the health care law. So that's how you would pay for it. Are there other ways you're open to paying for this rather than out of that? You know that some Democrats won't want to do that.
Well, they may not, but that's the best way to do it. Most students would be a little surprised to learn, there are about 15 or 16 million students, that in the health care law, the Congressional Democrats overcharge them on student loans. And the Congressional Budget Office says that if they charge them what they should be charging them, it'd produce enough money to reduce all student loan interest rates to about 5.3%. So we could take that money for this year, fix this problem, and also begin to address the real problem with student loans and high tuition, which is all the federal health care mandates that's soaking up the money that states normally would spend on public colleges and universities.
Well, let me ask this the other way. I look at this and I'm thinking universities are taking advantage of the fact that students actually have easier access to loans than others, and therefore feel comfortable raising tuition rates. I mean, I know we want to have these fights inside Washington, but it seems that universities aren't being held accountable to what has been a growth in tuition rates, particularly in private schools, but also public schools, that have been out of whack with cost of living.
Well, most students go to public universities, and the average tuition at a public four-year college is about $8,000. At a community college is about $3,000. Now, the reason tuition is going up primarily, and this didn't start with President Obama, but he's made it worse, is because the federal government is dumping these huge Medicaid costs on states. I know this as a former governor, and the money that you want to put into the University of Tennessee or California instead goes to Medicaid, and then the university raises tuition to make up for it. Last year in Tennessee, Medicaid costs were up 15%, so the governor and the legislature cut the universities 15%, and what happened? Tuition went up, and then student loans go up.
Well, you say this, and we've had this conversation before. You said you joked one time with, I think it was both Presidents Reagan and Bush, that you would have traded Medicaid for the education. Basically, if the federal government would manage Medicaid, get it out of the states, you would never have a state fiscal issue ever again.
No, that's right, and you've got a good memory. I proposed to President Reagan in the early 80s. I said, you take all of Medicaid, we'll keep all of kindergarten through the 12th grade education. And if we'd done that 30 years ago, the states would have about $90 billion more to spend this year than they do, and I guarantee you that a lot of that money would be spent at the universities, tuitions would be lower, the quality of the universities would be better.
Are you still for federalizing Medicaid, essentially, getting it out of the states?
Yes, I would do that if the federal government would get entirely out of elementary and secondary education. I'd make that swap in a minute. That would strengthen the states, it would make Medicaid better, and it would give states more responsibility for what's happening in schools.
All right, I want to turn to politics here. I don't have too much time. You've been an observer of this, and I ask you on that front, your advice to potential Republican candidates that get vetted. I know you've had to go through this process a few times, sometimes in secret, sometimes less secretive. Advice to various Republicans that may get vetted by Mitt Romney.
Well, it's worse than any kind of medical procedure you can think of. It's 3 weeks long or 4 weeks, and if you've had any kind of complex life, they want to know everything. Just be ready for it. And I would ask Governor Romney's representative, are you really serious about this? I don't want to go through all this for me and for my family unless you really want me, and I really want to be the Vice President of the United States.
So you would almost make them commit to saying, look, you are a real finalist here, and fine, then you would turn over all of this extra information.
That's right. That's in fact what I did one time. Dick Cheney said,
right.
I said, I don't want to be a ceremonial name out there. He said, well, they're just a handful of people. And I said, how many is a handful? He said, how many fingers do you have on your hand? So I listened to that, did it, took about a month. And I'm glad I did.
And from what if memory serves, that the type of person they were looking for, I've always heard the rumor that you said to then former Defense Secretary Dick Cheney, well, it sounds like you're describing yourself.
Well, I did tell him that. He said there are not very many people who could go on the list. I said, then why don't you do it? It sounds like you're describing yourself. He said, I don't want to do it. And of course, a month later, Governor Bush asked him to do it.
Right.
And I think that's good. You know, my advice to a presidential nominee would be pick somebody you like, with whom you're comfortable, and who'd make a good president. Because after about a week, only the top of the ticket matters.
Is there somebody out there you say to yourself, boy, I hope Romney runs with him. That'll make me feel good about the party.
No, it'd make me feel better about Governor Romney if he'd pick someone who he really is comfortable with, who helps bring out his strengths, who would make a good president of the United States, rather than trying to trick everybody into thinking that by picking a vice president, you're actually changing the top of the ticket. You're really not. And people know that. Over the last several elections, and you'd know this better than I, but many vice presidential nominees don't even carry their own states. It's all about the top of the ticket.
All right, Senator Lamar Alexander, I got to leave it there. Thanks for coming on, sir.
Thank you, Chuck.
All right, up next, we're going to get a preview of the day on Wall Street. The markets react.